If you like to tell people that you've read the book when the subject of a movie comes up, then this list is for you. Stay ahead of the curve by subscribing to The Book Was Better. Here are 5 books that are to become movies in 2023. Number 1. Killers of the Flower Moon. Back in the 1920s, oil was discovered on Native American lands in Oklahoma. This set into motion a series of murders of wealthy tribe members by oil barons. Killers of the Flower Moon chronicles the FBI's attempt to solve these murders. It was one of the FBI's first large-scale investigations. This is a horrific true story of greed, power, and violence. Here's how the New York Times describes David Grann's account of these events. In the last pages, Grann takes what was already a fascinating and disciplined recording of a forgotten chapter in American history, and with the help of contemporary Osage tribe members, he illuminates a sickening conspiracy that goes far deeper than those 4 years of horror. It will sear your soul. Martin Scorsese is set to direct the movie, so you know it's going to be a good adaptation. There was a movie that actually covered these events. It was a lesser-known Jimmy Stewart film called The FBI Story, which came out in 1959. It covered the FBI's first few decades when they went after the Ku Klux Klan, the Mafia, Cold War spies, and the murder of Osage tribemen for their oil. It's probably not as good as what Scorsese has in store for us, but if you like the TV show Dragnet, then you might like the movie The FBI Story. Before there was killing going on in the Mideast for oil, there was killing going on right in America's own backyard. The movie is going to star Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. Let's just hope that there's no de-aging software used in this movie. Number 2. Heat 2. Yes, there is a sequel to Heat in the works, but before they are going to make the movie, Michael Mann hooked up with writer Meg Gardner to novelize the material. The story of Heat 2 takes place in the events after the 1995 movie, as Chris Saharelis tries to escape LAPD after their Southland Bank shootout. As you recall, Chris is the Val Kilmer character, and he's the only member of McCally's crew to escape. The book jumps around in time, giving us a backstory, as well as moving forward a few years after the events of the movie. The backstory involves a pair of heists Neil McCauley's crew take part in. I enjoyed learning more about the Robert De Niro character. We get a lot of insight as to why this character is so cold and reserved, and why he believes you should not get attached to anything you aren't willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you spot the heat around the corner. McCally's crew is being pursued by a new threat. Their story has a cunning villain who wants to steal the loot, which our heroes have rightfully stolen from a Mexican drug cartel. The story also jumps into the future when Vincent Hanna, the Al Pacino character, is on the hunt for a stone killer that likes to terrorize home invasion victims after he steals their belongings. If you like your prose hard-boiled, this book is as hard as they come. Dashiell Hammett would be proud. Michael Mann said in an interview that he loves the material in Heat and always thought it needed an expanded universe. If you didn't know this, Heat was actually a remake. It was originally released in 1989 as a made-for-TV movie called LA Takedown. The director of LA Takedown was none other than Michael Mann. So yes, he actually remade his own movie. And yes, it contains the famous shootout and the famous coffee shop scene. Not as good as Al Pacino and De Niro sitting across from each other, but when you consider the director remade his own movie, you get the impression that Michael Mann felt strongly about this material and he wanted to get it right the second time. And did he ever? I still remember being blown away by this movie when I saw it in the theater in high school. Let's hope that on this one too, they leave the de-aging software in the box and just cast younger actors to play the Al Pacino and De Niro characters. I mean, where would De Niro's career be if de-aging software was around when Godfather 2 was made? The movie hasn't been greenlit yet, but Mann says he's definitely going to make it happen. Number 3, Anansi Boys. In this book by Neil Gaiman, a man named Mr. Nancy dies, and when his son travels to his funeral, he is told some shocking news. Mr. Nancy's real name was Anansi, and he was a West African folklore god who took the form of a spider. And in this story world, when a god passes away, their powers flow to the next of kin. But the son has no godlike powers. The reason why? He finds out he has a twin brother, and the twin is the one who got their father's powers. If this material sounds familiar, it's because the character of Mr. Nancy is from American Gods, and they exist in the same story universe. However, Neil Gaiman has made it clear that this is not a sequel to American Gods, merely an expansion of the American Gods universe. American Gods tapped into deep American folklore and explored man's relationship with God in an almost satirical manner. I loved how in American Gods, Gaiman started with the philosophical argument that man creates God and then took it to the next logical level. Well, if man did create God, then there must be an awful lot of gods running around in the world with things to do. I love Neil Gaiman's premise and execution, and as a Christian, I don't like people bashing my religion, but if you can critique my religion in a fun and creative way, then I welcome that with open arms. The book is being turned into a British miniseries with Delroy Lindo as Anansi and Malachi Kirby playing the twin sons. Whoopi Goldberg is in there somewhere too. Number 4, 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude is being made into a TV series on Netflix. It was off limits to Hollywood for the longest time for the simple reason that the author didn't think a filmmaker could do justice to the themes of what has been called the most important book to come out of Latin America. Gabriel Garcia Marquez's story is about 7 generations of the Buendia family in the fictional town of Macondo. The genre is magical realism, which means mythical events are intertwined with the world we live in. As the generations of the Buendia family experience romance, political intrigue, civil war, and death, their ghosts visit the generations throughout the story. In the city of Macondo, future generations repeat the mistakes made by past generations. This theme is a reflection of post-colonial Latin America and is why it's considered the most important work to come out of South American literature. The book serves as a commentary on Latin America's history of civil strife and how the cycle is played out over and over. The Buendia family repeats their mistakes just as Latin American society does. A theme of fatalism emerges where the characters are powerless to change their lives. It's understandable why the author would be reserved about Hollywood touching this story. According to one producer, who's now in prison, the author was willing to sell the rights to his studio under one condition, as the producer recounts his conversation with the author. He said that we must film the entire book, but only release one chapter, 2 minutes long, each year, for 100 years. That does sound like the author is joking, but Richard Linklater did something similar with Boyhood, which took 11 years to film as his star grew older. And if you've ever heard of the Up series, filmmaker Michael Apted made a series of documentaries following the lives of 7-year-olds as they grew up. Every 7 years, he's returned to re-interview the subjects and get their views on life and the world in general. This was started back in the 1960s, and they've released a documentary every 7 years. The latest installment was titled 63 Up, meaning that the 7-year-olds are now 63-year-olds. The series has a loyal following, and fans have said it really does feel like you're opening up a time capsule and talking to old friends each time a new documentary is released. So Gabriel Garcia Marquez's request to film it over 100 years wasn't completely out there. It might have been doable. But the author's family announced they had struck a deal with Netflix to develop the book into a series. There's even a teaser out on YouTube. According to the author's estate, for decades our father was reluctant to sell the film rights to Cien Años de Soledad because he believed it could not be made under the time constraints of a feature film, or that producing it in a language other than Spanish would not do it justice. But in the current golden age of series, with the level of talented writing and directing, the cinematic quality of content, and the acceptance by worldwide audiences of programs in foreign languages, the time could not be better to bring an adaptation to this extraordinary global viewership that Netflix provides. We are excited to support Netflix and the filmmakers in this venture and are eager to see the final product. I think that just means they finally got the right size pile of money. The author passed away in 2014, leaving his kids to protect his wishes for his life's work. Number 5, Dumb Money. If I told you that a movie was titled Dumb Money and it was about a recent event in the news, you might figure out what it's about. The book that Dumb Money is based on is called The Anti-Social Network, the GameStop short squeeze, and the ragtag group of amateur traders that brought Wall Street to its knees. This is a book by Ben Mesrick, which chronicles the crazy time back in 2021 when certain securities were taking off like gangbusters because of short squeezes among a number of retail and consumer stocks. Ben Mesrick is known for writing nonfiction in the subjects of tech and finance. His subject covers areas like cryptocurrency, MIT students playing the lottery, and Vegas betting schemes. His most famous work to date is The Accidental Billionaires, which later became The Social Network, about Mark Zuckerberg and the forming of Facebook. Ben Mesrick has a flair for writing nonfiction, as though it follows the 3-act story structure, and he also manages to stumble upon the most interesting of subjects. The book tells the story of a couple of subreddit users who posted memes and stock pics, but later found a hidden goldmine in stocks that have been overshorted by institutional investors. In a few volatile days, The Reddit users were the butterfly who flapped its wings and caused a tsunami across financial markets and made a couple of meme lords filthy rich. Pete Davidson, Paul Dano, Sebastian Stan, and Seth Rogen are set to star in it. If you were to make a movie about GameStop, I couldn't think of better casting decisions. I haven't read this book, but it's definitely on my list to read before Hollywood beats me to it. Be sure to read all these books before the movie comes out so you too can be one of those people who read the book first. That's it for this week. Stay tuned for more updates on books to become movies. Check out my own book, Grand Portage, about a man who buys an aircraft carrier and drags it across northern Minnesota. I hope this book gets turned into a movie someday. I would choose Werner Herzog to direct it, since he's already directed something similar with Fitzcarraldo. My book is on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Thanks for watching, and never stop reading.